How's it, folk? Sort of as a brief introduction, I'm built a career out of developing and delivering AI solutions into industry. And I get asked so many times around, how do we make this stuff real? We've got all this incredible theoretical stuff. We're hearing about all this big stuff in the news. But I've got this business, and I have a whole bunch of really specific things that I want to bring to life. And so through the course of this career, we've developed this framework. I'm going to talk through 6 very simple dimensions with you. And at the end of this, it'll give you the power to look at any function within your business and say, right, maybe we should be looking at an accelerated agenda to bring AI to life in this specific part of the domain. Or from an entire business perspective, this entire function should be shifted over and migrated into AI. And it's got a sense of realism to it. It's not about things that could be done, maybe with a bit of research we can get there. This is stuff that we can actually realize for you today. Just a little bit about the firm I'm with. It's Synthesis. It's the most exciting place to be at the moment. 26 years old, and we have a breadth of experience across a whole bunch of very exciting domains. And I can dig into that if you've got any queries later. I have an amazing team who's also joined me next door, so do give us a chat after this. So maybe a little bit just about some of the stuff that I've brought to life. One of which was a super exciting AI system that would take a very unsophisticated, very manual analog process and provide some very specific inputs to it to realize a change. And those inputs were derived out of an AI system, right? And so you need to follow a set of instructions to get this result. And in the fullness of stuff, right, we can look at any business process now, and we can sort of say, let's look at these things that we're working on, and how do we build the value out of that transformation and that change. Okay, so this is it. There's a lot of text here, but don't worry about that. We've built a tool that's also going to allow you to go and unpack this detail at your own time and in your own convenience. You can go and find it at nebula.synthesis.rocks. There's also a little QR code that you can go grab off my desk. But basically, we speak to these 6 dimensions. We sort of speak to problem, that's the thing at hand, the interface, which is how you interact with the problem at hand, the technology that sits behind it, the operations of your business, the people that drive your operations, and how your business plugs into the spectrum of businesses in the world. And given these 6 dimensions and these very simple self-evaluation questions, we can sort of put you on a spectrum between being open to disruption by a third party, right? So some change that's brought to the market, as one of the speakers in the earlier session said, eat your lunch. I think it's a lovely one because we're 15 minutes from lunch, and so it's not much longer. Or on the right-hand side, on the far extreme, where you are the disruptor, and you get to set the agenda. And this, from a business strategic perspective, is really important because you don't want to have the ground change under your feet by some external force and you have to play catch-up. Far better is to go be in a position to say, these are the things that we think about, these are the things we see coming, and these are the changes that we're going to bring to life in the world, which gives you this huge advantage over your competition. But you can also then look at this from a sort of way in which people think about the technology. It's exactly the same set of dimensions. But if you're the disrupted, or one of the disruptors, then the chances are that you are likely to be replaced. In other words, the function that is being performed, that you self-evaluate against, is ripe for disruption, and therefore you will be replaced by the technology. You've got this moving middle, and the reason why it's moving is 2 particular forces, the one of which, of course, is innovation and the power of these systems getting better and sort of maybe becoming a little bit more human. But the other component of it is that our jobs are changing, and that the world is also changing in respect to this technology. And so this middle is this kind of like buffer between these 2 forces. And so tomorrow it could be in one position, and the day after that in another. And on the far right-hand side, when you are a disruptor, you're also inherently accepting of the technology. So the stance you adopt is like, yes, I want to play with this stuff, I want to test it, I want to break things, I want to move quickly, I want to try and get the maximum value out of this before anyone else does. So the way in which you think about the technology is fundamentally different. And so this allows you to, or equips you to go into the change conversation with an impression of how your team is going to react to this proposition, right? Are they going to be protective? Are they going to take like a protectionist stance? Or do you think they're going to embrace it? Or do you think there's going to be this sort of like moving middle where we're quite uncertain exactly what we're going to get out of it? Okay, so let's dive into this, the 6 dimensions. First of which, and the most important of which, is the specific problem at hand, right? And it's a nice spectrum. It starts out by having a well-defined task. And a well-defined task is this amazing thing because you can put it in a box. You can say, these are my inputs, these are my outputs, this is the function that happens inside of it, and it is very easy to replicate. So you could, if we make it GenAI relevant, you could go and say that the thing in the box is equivalent to coming up with the correct prompt. Right, so you can go give this to your prompt engineers, and you can get the specific result out of it. The sort of moving middle is characterized where you have objectives, you've got identifiable tasks that fit into that objective, but there's a little bit of uncertainty, right? It's not as well known, it's not as clearly delineated, the tasks themselves are complex, and there's maybe interdependencies between them. And on the far right, and as an engineer I quite like this, it's an ill-defined problem. Maybe we don't even know what's broken yet, right? This is very exciting, at least I think it is. I tell myself this, that everything's going to be okay because I deal with ill-defined problems, so I can think my way out of the hole. But it's also quite important when you think around the power of these GenAI systems, their ability to reason on a blank slate isn't quite there yet. Is it going to get there? Absolutely. At least I'm going to get to retire. But that's kind of where we're at. When I think about the interface, this is particularly how you modify the problem. And again, this is designed to be as agnostic of any one industry as possible, but to try and describe a broad spectrum of things. So on the far left, again in the most disrupted space, you have a simple automation interface. And so you can just plug into it and you can issue commands to the automation interface, and it will make the result happen. Right? So you don't have to do any of that legwork, any of that heavy lifting. It's all going to come out of the wash just by connecting to the interface. The moving middle is defined as, again, this sort of like ill-defined nature to it. Maybe there's a web interface, a GUI that you can kind of hack on top, or maybe there's a proprietary interface that you can have to build some kind of connector to get that communication going. But you could even get those very complex ones that span multiple interfaces. So you kind of got to take a piece of data from one space, move it to the next, make a series of decisions, move it to the next objective, and make a series of decisions. And then on the most complex space, you've got these physical domains. If you actually think about like turning metal, even though you have CNC machines to go and do this, it's actually very difficult. You've got to set the piece, you've got to set the machine, you've got to zero it. And these aren't things that you could achieve through an automation interface. It's very like manual things that may not necessarily be instrumented. And so if you are doing those physical things, the chances are that you will be okay and unlikely to be disrupted by some external force. I often get asked, like, what happens, what do I do when AI takes my job? And the answer kind of is that you go farm, right? But I'm also wrong on that because we're dealing with these connected farms these days, and maybe farming isn't quite the right place. Okay, now there's a subtle difference between the interface and the technology, right? The interface is the sort of like technical way in which you sort of issue commands or manipulate things, but the technology that sits behind it is maybe a little bit more around the systems and processes embedded in that systems that brings the stuff to life. On the far left of the spectrum, the disrupted space, it is easily changed by a person, right? So you can have some way in which you can go and take a piece of technology and replace it with some other piece of technology without incurring large cost. There's no like sunken challenge there. Our moving middle is where we are sort of spanning multiple systems, and they have different modes of interaction. So the kind of the way in which you speak to the technology in situation A is different to the way that you would speak to technology in situation B. And so this difference makes it very hard to remain consistent in the pursuit of your objective. And then again, on the far right is where you are in fact the creator of the technology. I mean, there is nothing more exciting than going to a client and seeing them use the tool that you made, right? You've made the hammer that's beating nails now, right? And so where you are the person who has thinking about these abstract things and creating new technologies or new systems, I think that you have an advantage there about setting that agenda. From an operational space, this is quite interesting because this thinks about how the business changes as a function of the things that you put into it, right? And so where your humans in your operation, the people who make your business tick, are the process drivers, then on a bad case of flu across your entire business comes to a standstill, right? But then you've got this evolution and sophistications. You've got folk who become process supervisors, who become quality controllers. These are folk who sit at the end of a process and they look at the result and they say, it's good or not, and they make a change to the upstream system. Then you've got folk who take an abstracted view away from the system and they say, well, how do I make it better? Right? This is kind of where a lot of us sit today, is we look at these complex businesses and we say, where are the points of efficiency that I can tease out of it? And you can take another step back, another layer of abstraction, and think about how do we analyze how all these systems connect together? How do we tie using systems as a tactic to achieving an objective? Or then are you strategizing around how things happen? Or are you creating new systems or creating new interconnections between systems? And that has an exciting set of complexities that explode out of it. And then we can actually talk about the information that's in our brains, right? In the folk who run your business, how much of the know-how of your daily operations are embedded in their minds, right? And so where you've got folk who are interface experts, so someone who operates a machine and it has a very well-defined set of objectives and you can push some buttons. There's not a lot of information that's embedded in their minds, right? In terms of how the whole system works and so forth. It's more around becoming an expert in that very narrow interface. And then you have folk who understand how a tool works. And so you can go and take this tool to another problem, right? And so here you have an abstract understanding of what a tool does, right? So how does a hammer work? What are the things that a hammer works with versus what a spanner works with? And it's an abstract idea, but I think it applies to everything, right? Where do I use Excel, or where do I use PowerPoint? Or where do I use Excel, or where do I use SageMaker? It's a great sort of question to start asking of the people. Then you can have folk who look at the outputs of systems. They see these numbers and they can derive patterns out of it. And they can apply techniques and tease out of the data that your system generates information that helps you drive decisions. Then you've got folk who think even further deep into the system who say, well, I understand how this stuff works, and so here is this output stream of information that allows you to make better decisions, right? And so typically if you think of financial reporting into a business, these are function generators who have this incredible intrinsic knowledge of how a system works and whose insights and manipulation of the data helps form the stage in which you make your decisions. And then, of course, we have folk who are using AI already to help drive these decisions. They're actually empowering this technology to support the decisioning process. We have folk who are system architects who think about how all these pieces, abstract pieces, tie together, where the right place is to put a link between A and B, and why not you shouldn't connect B to C. And then we have our artists and our innovators and our abstract thinkers, the folk who imagine a world that doesn't even exist yet. And then the last one we talk about is business. And this is really about how unique your business is with respect to a locality or a global service provider. So for example, if you are a commoditized regional player, it means that there are lots of folk like you. It's likely that you are fighting on a very small margin base and that you are primed for disruption, either by some global player who innovates a new way to supply what you do, or in fact amalgamation out of a series of your competitors to make a larger consortium. And then it evolves, right? And it evolves in terms of either becoming larger with a broader market access or becoming more niche in terms of providing a more specialist service. And so our sort of moving middle is defined as this sort of well-established sector where your business has a series of differentiators. You think about the classic competitive differentiators of cost, quality, customization, service, and delivery. And then we can move over into the disruptive space where you are really a one-of-a-kind business. Nobody does what you do. And so you kind of get to set what it is that you do. Don't be too ahead of the market, because that can get exciting, but then at least you get to set the agenda and disrupt other folk and what they're doing. So with that said, there is a great way you can go and actually engage with the self-evaluation framework. I mentioned it earlier. It was nebula.synthesis.rocks. You can go and check it out, go and complete this for an individual, for a business function, for an entire business. And we will generate out of that a way in which you can get started today. What are the steps that you need to take immediately to go and start that journey? And how to go and manage that process, given you may have some replacement threat, you may have some protectionism, or you may have some acceptance. So just very quickly in wrapping up, talk briefly about the firm that I'm in. I'm a Synthesis, so I'm part of the software division of the Capital Appreciation Group. We're listed on the JSE. Super exciting place to be. We're touching all sorts of exciting technologies, from payments through to bespoke software development. We have an international presence that we're very proud of as well, sort of taking South African solutions to the world. We touch a whole broad spectrum of industries and verticals. Our history is in banking and capital markets. We have deep experience in solutions to insurance, as well as agriculture, retail, and telecoms. So, folk, thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed chatting with you, and love to take some questions if there are any. Or it's lunch. Good.
No questions, Michael. Okay.
Lovely, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael.
Appreciate it.